Where's it led you to?
I used to be quite on board with the new atheism. What I've realized is that this is far more interesting and intricate. And I would say plausible than I'd given it credit for before.
But you are the opposite. You would have been running wild with Jesus, I think.
Yeah.
Bear Grylls sits down with Alex O'Connor and he asks him a question. What about you? What do you think about Christianity and the one they call Jesus, the most important person to ever live? And he breaks it down. Let's get into it, guys. This is absolutely fascinating stuff.
Tell me about you. Tell me where because you have such a brilliant understanding of all this, much greater than mine. Where does it leave? How do you feel about all of this?
Well, thank you. I'm interested in the New Testament from a sort of scholarly perspective. And
when did that begin?
A few years ago, I think I was talking about religion and theology, and I had a biblical scholar on my show. And as so often happens, I might have an expert in animal consciousness. And so I'll say, okay, this week, I've got to sit down, I've got to learn about how octopus brains works. And as happened with the octopus brains, the same thing happens here, which is actually, this is way more interesting than I thought. And I want to keep looking into this. And so for me, the thing, like, I talk about this and I debate this all the time, and I debate whether Jesus was God or whether he even claimed to be God and all of this kind of stuff. But for me, the undeniable thing is that there's this extraordinary historical figure who did something extraordinary. And there's something really weird that happened that caused a bunch of people to start quite early on worshipping him, which is a very strange thing to do to a human being, especially in a Jewish culture. And so to me, getting at the Gospels from a scholarly perspective helps me to understand who this historical figure was. That's the thing I'm really interested in, almost in the way that somebody might be really interested in Julius Caesar or in whether the Iliad, whether the Trojan War really happened and whether that kind of stuff. I sort of take this approach.
That feels to me like that was your point of entry.
Yes.
Keith Green always loves to say that every other religion has something good to say about Jesus. Every religion says that Jesus was a good man and maybe one of the greatest prophets, the most enlightened, the one who maybe was an alien, all those, all good stuff, So why not go to the closest source and see what Jesus actually had to say? If everyone else says that he's a good person, he wouldn't lie. He wouldn't say anything bad, right? Because the only reason why any of these people would know anything about Jesus is because of the source in the first place. And they all say good things. But the source says something a little bit different. The source says that he's a little bit, he is better and greater than just being a good man. He is the Son of Man. He is the Son of God. He is the only way, the truth, and the life. No one can go to the Father except through Jesus.
Yeah.
But you've had such a journey and you've met so many amazing people and you've debated so many different angles and things. Yeah. Where's it led you to?
It's led me to, I used to be quite on board with the new atheism stuff. I've spoken about this a lot on my show.
What does that mean?
You know, like the sort of Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, it was really popular, the debates that they were doing, they called it new atheism. Yeah. And it was this body of like atheist thought with the God delusion, this kind of stuff, which was really popular. And it had this sort of quite strident, debate me bro kind of attitude. And I was really swept up by that. I thought that was really exciting and cool. And I was beginning to sort of shake that off and grow up a bit, essentially. And then running the podcast, what I've realized is that this is far more interesting and intricate. And I would say plausible than I'd given it credit for before. So, I'm still not a Christian.
Maybe I'll go back. But that's what I love. Everyone's seen that new atheism is dying because they talked about how impossible it was that Christianity could be a thing. They talked about how ludicrous it was that you would believe in a fairy tale, a sky daddy. But now everyone's realizing that is not the case. It's more plausible that there is a God in heaven who created the universe and intricately designed everything within it that gives you purpose.
Some people say to me, like,
it's a funny word though, that anyway.
Yeah.
Like I'm less and less certain about the word.
Yeah.
You know what somebody said to me the other day? You're like this. The period of greatest growth ever in the history of the church was from 33 AD to 350.
Yeah.
And during this time, there was no church buildings,
Yeah.
no sermons,
Yeah.
but no singing,
Yeah.
and no Bible.
Yeah.
You know?
That's not true. There's definitely sermons, man. And as soon as they were able to meet in buildings, they did because they could get together. Peter preached the greatest sermon. Maybe he didn't sit down and write it out. I don't know. We don't know that. The 3,000 people, that's a megachurch. I love Bear Grylls' heart, but it seems like he has this negative connotation towards religion. Religion itself is a very good thing. And it's crazy how so many people are like, I hate organized religion. We just talked about this at church. I hate organized religion. Well, do you want to disorganize religion? Like, what are you talking about? He said that no one else says that they hate organized government. No one else says that they hate organized store. They hate disorganization besides spiritual things. Why is that? Because it points out the flaws within your life if it's organized. It shows you how disorganized you are. Woohoo! That will preach.
We get very tied up in all of those things and the labels and even the phrase Christian.
Yeah.
It's like I'm not sure where for me it feels quite like man-made, these sort of words.
Oh,
yeah.
It literally says in the Bible though that they were first called Christians at Antioch. It's in the Bible. No one just randomly made it up, but whatever.
That is where I can definitely agree with, especially a Christian of your kind, which is to say someone who will say that and recognize that. Because some people place a lot of stock, particularly Catholics, and they place a lot of stock in church tradition and the traditions that developed after Nicaea. And I look at that with a similar kind of man-made skepticism. And I think to myself, it also gives me license to, when I look at the New Testament and I think, some scholars think that Paul maybe didn't write that letter and that's a big problem. But for someone like me, it's like, who cares? If I decide that Paul didn't write 1 Timothy, then I'll just look at the rest of it and I'll try to work out what came between the lines. A good friend of mine said to me once, when there's all this discussion about whether we have the real words of Jesus and whether the Gospels are accurate and whether it's all apocryphal stories, he said that because these were written from early church traditions, Jesus was a real man who was doing real things. We can still know a lot about the character of Jesus. He said, imagine if, for example, have you heard of the Churchillian drift, where quotes get attributed to Churchill, even though he never said them? Same thing happens with C.S. Lewis.
Yeah.
And he said, imagine if the only information you had historically about Churchill was a book of apocryphal quotes that he never actually said, but that people believed he said. You'd still get a pretty good picture of the kind of person Winston Churchill was.
That's worst case scenario. You still get a pretty good...
You're still getting an image. And so I'm really interested in the scholarly stuff and well, did Jesus really say that? Was this an interpolation? Blah, blah, blah. Is this a translation thing? But the thing that's most fascinating to me below all of that is who was this guy and what was he doing to cause all of this? Even if it's a bunch of confusion and confused timelines, and even if some stories got in there that shouldn't have got in there, the fact that this scramble to write all of this down and turn it into
even with the drift.
Exactly, it's still
I think
extremely interesting.
If we could time travel, you would be one of the rough gang. So would I.
Yeah,
I don't think you'd be. I mean, even though you kind of the headlines of you is professor, sort of Oxford. Well, are you a professor?
I'm not a professor. No.
You're very clever. Do you know what I mean? That could potentially put you into the Pharisee type thing. Right. But you are the opposite. You are one. You would have been running wild with Jesus, I think.
Yeah, I like
that. That's amazing. He would have been running wild with Jesus. Maybe that would be great. I would love that. I hope he runs wild with Jesus now. Run wild. Live free.
And also, I sort of always got the feel with Jesus. He loved the challenge. He loved the riposte. He loved the mental, verbal, theological challenges.
There's a lot of jousting, a lot
of jousting and brilliant sort of responses that have never been better. You know, whether it's in should we pay our taxes to Caesar or not? The Pharisees are trying to trip him up. Mm-hmm. And yet sort of that response of just whose head is on the coin, pay to him and pay to God what is God. It's sort of...
Right, but your whole criticism towards the Bible in the first place. I find it very fascinating when people criticize the Bible, like, well, do we really know what he said? Like, we don't really know. But then they quote Jesus and talk about like all the amazing things he has said, and they quote like some brilliant stuff, but it just like completely contradicts what they were talking about in the first place of what exactly did Jesus say? I don't know, maybe he did. And then they go about saying like, well, we know he's amazing because he said this. And that's just confusing for me. Either he did or he didn't. Like, they don't hold to the same framework when they want to talk something good about Jesus and then or something negative.
Yeah, there's a
brilliant. And I would think that I see a beautiful alignment. Actually, I think if we would go back in time travel, you'd be running wild with it.
Well, if the science ever gets there and we manage to go back in time, when people say, where would you go?
Yeah, where would you go? Come on, what would you do?
Of course you'd go to meet Jesus.
I love it. What point? Where would you go? Would you go after the resurrection, or would you want to be there at the beginning? What about in the 17 years?
That's interesting. I think that the moment that you'd want to witness, if you could only have 5 minutes, would be the moment of the crucifixion. And the reason is that you would see that this was a man, the crucifixion happened, you would see whether the curtain tore, whether the sky opened, all of that kind of stuff. And it would give you all of that. I mean, But
they keep finding evidence for like the, I think in the sort of, the star stuff and they said there was
like the solar eclipse.
The solar eclipse. I've actually done it. It's the exact kind of like
That's really interesting.
It's really interesting. And also that moment is kind of...
That is true though. Like you can go back because you can see how the stars move at a certain rate. You can go back all the way 2,000 years at the rate of the solar system. And you can see that there would have been a solar eclipse at really, really close time to like the Passover, or like when Jesus would have been crucified, which is fascinating, which can point to another amazing evidence for Jesus's death. And they weren't just making things up.
So to see the first ever Roman Christian, well,
yes, yeah.
The centurion
truly
son of God.
Yeah.
This man is the son of God.
But then part of me
That's interesting. You go to that moment. That's kind of cool.
But part of me would say, although, you want to see the resurrection, you want to see part of me wants to say I would just like to meet him walking along during his ministry and just say, listen, man, I've got 5 minutes.
Yes.
Who are you? Like,
are you the real deal?
Messiah, are you God? Are you claiming to be God? Like, that's what I'd want to do. I'd want to ask that question. And I mean, where would you go in Jesus' life?
So
5 minutes.
Jesus would say, "Who do you say I am?" Some say that you are Elijah the prophet. Some say that you are the incarnation of Jesus, of John the Baptist. Some say you are the Son of God. Tell John that you have seen the lame walk, the blind see, 5,000 people fed, lepers healed.
It's so interesting, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, I think so. I mean, if you think of the biblical, so there are a lot of people that did get that chance and did it come exactly for that purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Say, I mean, one bit you might not have noticed that I really like is John the Baptist's relationship with Jesus. We kind of touched on it, but there's a really nice moment where if you think if anyone in the Jesus orbit is going to believe in him, it's John the Baptist.
Mm-hmm.
Known him from birth, kicking inside my mother's stomach whenever Jesus walked in the room. Like, I know this guy is a real deal. I'm baptizing the River Jordan, saying there was one is coming after me is like, I know.
Mm-hmm.
And yet when he was in Herod's prison and he gets a chance to get a message to his disciples, the one thing he says is go back to Yeshua and just ask him, you really are who you say you are.
Is it you?
And I love that because like, if even John the Baptist had doubts because of he's like being tortured and in a brutal prison and like we're human, then I can have doubts.
That's a good
and it's
point.
like, he's been a real hero of mine, actually, John the Baptist.
Me too. I think he's my favorite person.
Well, it's interesting you say that.
So
I'd be interested what I like about him is that everyone always, Jesus says there's no one being greater.
Yes.
He is the number one in the prophets.
That's
number
right.
one. And I always think we think to be number one in life, you've got to be like a leader. You got to be like, I would think Moses or one of these people, like on top of the mountain, the big beard, the loud voice, the authority. It's how we're brought up to think these are our people in our lives who are the leaders.
Mm-hmm.
And yet it was the rough one who lived off the land
Camel
and was
skin.
wild and just loved this Yeshua character.
Of course, Bear Grylls would like him because that's what Bear Grylls likes. Survival. John the Baptist eating locusts and wild honey, wearing camel skin.
Yeah.
And he said no one better. Why do you like him?
I think he's fascinating because he seems to be this sort of precursor to Jesus in a weird way. He's the introduction to Jesus. There's a bit of mystery as to who he was and why he was baptizing and why he found his way into the wilderness and what it means to preach a baptism for the repentance of sins and why Jesus would need to undergo that. All of these questions are so interesting. There are also communities of people who particularly revere John the Baptist. There's a group called the Mandaeans who are like this Gnostic sect who think that John the Baptist is the most important prophet. Now, they see Jesus as a false prophet, actually. There's this whole historical fascination with John the Baptist because and it's also the insistence early on that he is not the Messiah. You do it
keep
in the
saying,
book as well.
I'm not the guy.
Which implies to me that at the time, there were lots of people who thought he was the Messiah.
Yeah.
And
because that's what happens. People want to think somebody's great and then the power goes to your head.
And when Herod Antipas first hears about Jesus, he goes, this guy is John the Baptist reborn in the Gospels. And so what was John the Baptist doing if when he hears this Jesus guy, it reminds him of John? So it seems like John the Baptist had this incredible ministry and he must have been doing all kinds of interesting things and there were all kinds of people who thought he was the Messiah. And so, and we only get clues to that in the Gospels. And so I'd be fascinated. Do you know what? Maybe I'd go to the baptism. So I'd love to meet John the Baptist.
With the sky open.
Yeah, that would be pretty cool to see too,
Because if you see that, then you know. Because you can't fake that, So in a way, that's as convincing as a resurrection. Because if you're there and you literally see this guy up in the voice of God going, this is my son.
And the dove, you kind of get a proof of the Trinity.
Well, it's like...
You get to meet John and you get to see Jesus. It's all there. I think
you know what?
that
they
might
all
be the
saw
moment.
all these things. And yet still the next day, they would go, well,
not so sure.
The clouds could have... And was it thunder that sounded? And that dove, there had been a few doves around that day.
Never enough. What I do know, though...
That is hilarious. And that is a problem with a lot of people. A lot of skepticism going around town is when you get all the signs in the world and still don't believe. That's why, when people say, if God would just show me a sign, if he wrote my name on the clouds, then I would believe. And then eventually you come up with just logical conclusions saying, well, the clouds they got like that and it was a complete coincidence. That's the reality. But no, sometimes God works in mysterious ways.
That I speak to a lot of interesting people. I speak to some scientists. If I ever meet one who tells me that they're onto something with time travel, I'll know who to call to go back and meet John the Baptist.
I love it.
Bear Grylls. Thank you for your time.
Well, you know what? You're such a great guy, and I really mean it.
So that was awesome. Shout out to Alex O'Connor for having the conversation. Amazing. Praying for him that he will come to know Jesus. So awesome. I loved his podcast with Maton. I just laughed the whole time, and it was hilarious. Anyway, guys, I encourage you keep on trusting in Jesus. Put him first. And you got to have faith in times of uncertainty. You never know. Anyway, guys, love and appreciate you all. Make sure to hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't. I'm trying to hit 100,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and I know we can do it with your help, so thank you so much for all the love and support. It means the world. Have an amazing day, and God bless.